always one down the front and the ladies up the back. If you could just introduce yourself and your publication, please.
I'm Zhang from Spirent Research.
Oh, no, sorry, sit down. No.
My question really is about security. We hear lots of vendors out there talking about ISO standards, SA70 Type 2 standards, and most CIOs actually don't fall for it. They talk about the fact that these standards are self-certified standards and are not relevant to cloud specific. Can you just throw some light as to why the community is still persistently using these standards? Very well knowing the fact that they're not very receptive at this time.
Anybody want to take that? In terms of why we're using standards that are not specifically relevant to cloud?
I'm Shiew from Micro. I'll attempt to answer the question. I don't pretend that I'm an expert in standards. I believe probably because cloud is so new, alright, and there are also policies that are struggling to be established, and therefore I think there are a lack of standards in that way. And also looking at the aspect of compliance. Today most of the compliance are really business oriented, and also I think a lot of people in the IT industry, especially the CIOs and so on, well, a lot of people are struggling to invest in compliance. But compliance doesn't mean it's full protection as well. So to comply to a certain standard, what is the guarantee, or what is the I would say confidence that they will get that compliance will mitigate their risks as well. I may not have answered all these questions, but I do probably think that's probably because it's quite new and lack of policies. Standards are probably not up there.
If I could give you an additional view to that, I think you'll find that some organisations do not know what they've got in the cloud. There are many organisations that we've spoken to that will be surprised by the fact that one of their teams has been dropping $50 a month on something from Amazon to complete a project, and there was no awareness of it in-house. I personally think the IT departments are, talking about marginalisation and bypassing of IT. It's a major issue. Organisations may not know what's going into the cloud. Standards have not kept pace with development, and until I think you heard a little bit this morning about certification. If I think back to telco days and think about network interoperability, until we have cloud interoperability, until we can start to look at some standards there, how do you certify against a moving target? It's very, very difficult. Any other questions at this point? In that case, I'm going to sort of start with one which is a comment that I hear from enterprises. Why do we bother with security in the cloud? Because if I'm taking my business into a cloud environment, and particularly going to a third-party services provider, isn't that their problem? I'm absolving myself from responsibility in my business and security. I'm giving that to a third party to look after. Daniel, if you like, Trend has its own cloud security solutions out there. I mean, what's your view on that? Whose responsibility is it?
Well, I believe the responsibility of a company's business data belongs to the company. I believe most of the business leaders will agree to that. If that information were to be leaked out to the open market, especially competitors, just imagine how damaging it will be for your business. So it's very vital that going into the cloud today, there are not many technologies out there that are able to support, let's say, putting the data in the cloud. Like in Australia, as Tim has mentioned just now, that there are concerns about data in the cloud. I'll give you an example. Before you place your photographs into Facebook, right? We have to consider very carefully, in the next 5 years, would you still want that photograph to be there? Right? That that is actually something to do with your own privacy as well, so you have to consider that. The next example is Gmail. A lot of you may use Gmail. You place a lot of information, your mail, private ones and business one in Gmail. When you think you erase your Gmail account or also your Gmail mails from Gmail, do you think all your data is really removed? Since Google is responsible in providing service level of the mail, they will have backup somewhere. What if the leakage comes from internally? So most spread today are less, I would say, less on the penetration side from the outside, because there are a lot of parameter protection and defense has been set up. Now, a lot of threat leakage today comes from internally. Firstly, the infection comes from the web, and someone actually brings an infected USB or something, and to work and infect the cloud from inside. Well, you do not know. Your information could be stolen. So how do you protect against all those? Right? And well, going back to Gmail, so you remove your account, you remove your mail. Someone breaks into the Google's backup and gets your mail out. What do you think? See, that's security for a fault. Now, there are products now available. Trend Micro has a product which is called Secure Cloud. I do not want this to be a laboratory for Tuesday. But it has the ability to actually encrypt the data for you to store on the public cloud. And therefore, when you decide to terminate a cloud vendor or move out of the cloud, that data is encrypted in that database. So someone else will actually crack it, but will not be able to see the data because it's encrypted. So the only applications that can read the data is actually through the client on the user side, okay, whatever cloud applications you use. So these are some of the technologies that would actually give people some comfort to use the cloud.
So Danny, it's my data, my responsibility, your service, and there's a breach. Are you going to pay my bills?
Well, that's a good question. I think that depends on the contract.
We didn't script that this morning, which is why I'm looking at it.
Well, I think that depends on the contract. Like a lot of people say about SLA, who's really going to actually put down whose responsibility for what. I think if the vendor supplying the storage or database facility has agreed to those liabilities, then there will be a different story. Right? But if they have not, then a different SLA contract will come about, I suppose.
All right, then I'd like you to consider that we have this balloon, and we have all these things with security in it, and it's getting heavy, and it's getting complex, and we're struggling to deal with it. And we have, for example, the device, the data, the network, throw a couple of others in there, application and maybe cloud. Which of those is the most relevant for these an organisation? What is the most important aspect across those five for security? Is it the network? Natasha, you want to do where security should move?
Sure. So Genband really comes from a service provider side. Some of our largest service providers that are our customers are actually hosting a lot of enterprises. So we see things from the carrier's perspective. So what I have to say is from that side. What we are starting to see is as many of the end devices are starting to become somewhat simpler. I mean, you have the iPads and so forth. You're no longer spending that much time on your laptops. You're spending more time on your iPads and iPhones. These devices have lesser and lesser security in general built into these devices compared to your laptops. So we see the security aspects becoming a lot more a network issue as opposed to the end device issue. And absolutely we see the service providers that we work with being a lot more concerned about providing that level of security so that they are not liable at the end of the day as they are offering your services or they are launching the services even if they do not control the content.
Okay, there's certain states in North America where I, as a user, as an employee of an organisation, am personally legally liable if I have a security breach. So there are organisations as employees going, you had the breach, you're personally responsible, not me from a business perspective, which is dangerous. I'd like a kind of show of hands. Everybody, it's been a long morning, so I'm going to try and wake you up a fraction. Hands up. Network security, critical? Not critical. Show of hands are critical. Who says yes? No Genband employees. They keep my map, put your hand down. About half. Everybody else, the rest of you think network security is not relevant, unimportant. Rising on those guys aren't going to like you very much. Jean, you're in an interesting point, because if I think about this from my perspective as a business, as Acme, I've got now a lot of complexity in my environment. I've got some things in the cloud, I've got some data, I'm running equipment that I may not necessarily know what it can do if I've virtualized. So if I've got a cloud and a virtualized environment, multiple machines, different data location points, mobility coming into play, some data over here, some over there. How do I know? How do I know that my security is going to hold up? Is there a way for me, as that cloudified organisation, to actually ensure that my security is going to do what it should do?
Actually, the answer for that is you actually don't. As a matter of fact, that's the concern. Each time you are adding on the technology, or each time you're moving your service, your end user to the cloud, and you're facing the same questions you had before on your own private services, is what kind of level of performance are you going to provide, and what's availability, and what's the security. And that's all unknowns, and God had to find a means to eliminate those unknowns. So through the testing, the emulations, and through all different, depends on who you talk to, different vendors and different service providers will have different answers about effectiveness and the availability of their services to provide that level of security. But you'll have to really have to find out and limit that unknowns by yourself.
Okay, so how do I do that? Because let's say I'm taking a Trendline Pro solution, and my data is sitting in the cloud, and my applications are there too, and I'm encrypting the data in the cloud environment, and I've got some security around the application. Doesn't that degrade my application's performance? Doesn't that cause problems now for my general usage in the business? Because that, it's great to have all this stuff out there, and we're putting security layers and wrappers around it, but all of that you do has an implication for the performance of your network and your applications. So what do I do?
Sure. Actually, that's how when you design your network, design your service, you got to have to ask a lot of questions on how many users I'm going to do, what's the dynamic of your users. And they travel, they're on the mobiles, and also what kind of level of performance they have to expecting for. As we say, the best security, you just cut the wires and nothing will come through. Obviously, it's not going to work. And the security may be working for 1 or 2 people, but what happens when you have thousands of people, 9 o'clock in the morning, all turn on, all want to access your company's database, and how that's going to work? And you're going to have to test it. You're going to have to, if you do the virtual, using the cloud virtual environment, you're going to have to simulate thousands of virtual users based on how large your organization is going to be, and all that work. You have to do all that work to eliminate the unknown.
Jim, I can see Natasha there wanting to go. Be quiet, it's my turn. Natasha.
So actually, I agree completely, and I think a lot of the scale issues become quite a bit more complex because mobility is added on top of that. Few different things. I mean, you're looking at. Let me talk about 2 separate points. One is just raw scale. a few years ago, we actually started working with Spirent systems. We had a cloud-based solution for a service provider, and we said, okay, let's do the secure access because, of course, encryption needs to be there. And when we started testing, it was very clear that the volumes and the levels that we were looking at, nobody had looked at before. So we had to start from scratch and build. Here's how you would scale that entire infrastructure. It was a
So how large? I mean, how many users?
We were talking on every device, hundreds and thousands of subscribers. And now you're talking about things like, you talk about high availability. When you just talk about devices connecting, things happening, that's one thing. Now you're talking high availability in the presence of security and so forth. High availability in the presence of mobility and so forth. The problems become quite a bit more complex. I was just thinking this morning, I came in here, last week I was actually in Turkey, and the week before in the US. I cannot log into my Facebook anymore. It's doing some security checks and it always fails. Now, this is just Facebook, this is me checking different things, photos maybe. Imagine this solution now if you have mission critical things that you're running in the cloud. And you're mobile from place to place, and these are mission-critical applications that you need access to from different locations. This becomes a significant and huge problem. You need mutual authentication between end devices, subscribers, and your network, and so forth to ensure that things work. You need encryption. You need, multiple levels of confidentiality built into that solution.
So how do I then, and this is for you, Danny, I guess, how do I then guarantee performance? Because if I'm going to do all those things, it's going to slow me down. What can you do to help me with that problem?
Okay. I think the traditional security products today, most of them today are very traditional. When you go into the virtual space, and especially back into the data center that delivers the services that Natasha requires, it's run on standalone platforms or operating systems or even physical servers. Right? Now, in the cloud environment, it is very highly virtualized in the data centers. Therefore, today's product, when let's say you introduce a security software, whether it is a software firewall or a software AV type product into each of the virtual images in the cloud environment, where each of these images decide to do a scan roughly at the same time. Most of the resources would be like what Natasha and security here spoke about, that would bring the performance of the entire data center down. That is called the scan storm in the security software world. We call it the scan storm. And that will kill whatever applications you need to deliver. So the new applications for security now comes in different forms. It has to treat the virtualized environment like another new world or its own new network within a physical service, which actually are elements of the cloud. And the virtual servers or images or applications that in these servers would be like their own servers, like the physical that you used to have LAN connecting to physical servers. Now you have hypervisors connecting to virtual servers and applications. So products need to work at that level, protecting at that level, reducing I would say computing resources of the physical server without killing it, and at the same time protecting it from security breaches, so that I would say applications can be delivered and scaled at higher availability. So that is the new breed of application that are around, and of course Trend Micro is leading in that space with the kind of application that we have. Rightly, IBC is
basically, here's the advice I would give is before you sign a dotted line, sign that service contract, ask them to show you test proof, show you the performance, availability, security, And of course, if you have a lot of people so you're running a large organizations, and ask for scalability.
Ladies and gentlemen, do you have any questions? I have a question, anybody simply dropped in.
Lots of knowledge from Acrofan. When we talk about data security, can the panel please elaborate on what data needs to be secure?
Okay, so from my perspective, or from Genband's perspective, any data that you consider as your mission critical data needs to be secure, and I would actually refine that even further. It's not just about what needs to be secure, it's about isolating the data that is relevant data from the data that's not so relevant. For example, today if you look at enterprises are actually having users who are not just using mission critical applications, but they're actually doing at the same time streaming music, streaming video. They're working there, but they're doing streaming video on the same device that they were actually doing their mission critical stuff as well. So when you talk about security, the first thing you need to be able to do is also isolate what is the type of application that the different subscribers are actually using. Once you have a better understanding of what the different subscribers are actually using, then you can actually figure out how you want to secure and when and how much you want to secure. But identification is the first key element from our perspective.
Okay, just to add to that and possibly contradict you, social media platforms, I would say are driven out of the marketing department, not IT. CIO at a round table I did last week on social media. Yep, we've got social media, didn't know we had it. It's been running for 18 months. Something happened with it and they asked me to fix it. And then he looked at all the data and everything that was going through the social media site. Yammer, it's not particularly secure, and had a meltdown. So I would actually suggest that sometimes you don't know what applications you've got going.
So actually I would to your rebuttal, what I would say is that I think that's exactly what I mean is it's about intelligence, understanding what's happening. If I look at social media sites such as Facebook, in our concept, we consider it as a virtual application. It's not real. What is it? Is it a website? It's a website from which you can do photos, you can launch streaming media, you can do streaming video, you can do email, you can do text, you can do IM, you can do hundreds of things. It could be that 2 of the subscribers in your enterprise are actually now launching a website from Facebook, and then they're sending the links to their friends, which happens to be a bad website, a problematic website. You need to be able to isolate that from everything else that they're actually doing, to be able to say that this is the issue, and then to be able to pipe that down, not just everything.
Danny, can you fix that?
Yep, certainly.
No editorials.
Okay, no editorials. Yeah, there are technologies out there that actually verifies whether the links that are attached to the social media that needs to go out are actually genuine and safe or malicious. So those are some of the ways that companies can actually verify even the end users of social media. They can acquire technology that is able to scan for them those links that are on social media, whether it's malicious. So on both sides, the user side and also the people who need to launch marketing through social media will have confidence that they're able to do it. Now, the attacks by hackers is from everywhere on the internet, whether it's social media or websites. They can do injections into applications. There is no stopping it. Right? So there are also technologies that also will protect the data center servers that launch this kind of, I would say, websites with security that prevents them from such vulnerabilities as well. Right? So vulnerabilities are everywhere because most popular operating systems that are used will be targeted by hackers anyway. So to safeguard data and also whatever information needs to be launched, those are the kinds of technology that data center and also end users should be looking at adopting as well.
Oh, yeah. You're keeping me from coffee.
Yeah, this is a question further to the discussion right now about social media. A point also which Natasha brought up earlier about how she was accessing Facebook, across different geographies and across different mobile networks, and the content was blocked. And then you have to make a point during the presentation where you're saying that SLAs are around being framed around where the content is being hosted in the data center. My question is, and perhaps I might be mistaken, that is this really an issue of content rights management rather than security? Because I don't know if it's about so much about security laws as much as which country or which regulatory body wants you to watch or access the content, as much as it's about content breakdown insecurities, right?
Can I flip the question back to you and say I think it's probably about compliance and access governance, maybe not necessarily content right management, but in the issue of social media, in fact anything frankly even within the corporate network, I think organisations are fairly loose about what they do with data and how I can transfer that around the place. So compliance and access governance I actually think are probably more critical.
But, sorry again, but suppose okay, let me put it this way. So if I'm trying to access Facebook, let's say in China, and for some reason, that particular mobile provider doesn't want me to watch that content and blocks the content. How is it a compliance issue?
Okay, so you're talking about accessing content, I'm talking about distributing data. So so I agree with you on that front. I'm talking about the scenario where I'm sitting here, I'm using my personalized email to send a corporate file outside the organization. Sorry, miscommunication, my fault. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to break for coffee, Manny. I would encourage you to think about questions that you might like to phrase for the next debate, because it's a bit different than this. We're going to have 4 organisations on stage, and bookending those companies are going to be Cisco and HP. 2 organisations that might have some interesting views about how to do cloud and where it should go and what price you should pay for it. So I'd like you to think about things that you might wish to pose to them about what may or may not be the best way to embrace a cloud service. I would like to thank you for your patience as we've run a little bit long for this morning session. If you could please thank Natasha, Jean, and they've been very patient.